I'm starting this interview for the Newport Historical Society's project, Oral History on the Neighborhoods of Newport. My narrator on this March day in 1984 is Mr. Norman McAskill. I'm going to start asking you where you were born.
Well, I was born in Newport. In fact, I was born in a house on the corner of East Bowery and Middleton Avenue. In those days, Dr. Sullivan was considered the baby doctor, and his nurse was Mrs. Douglas, and they were a real team.
I suppose more Newporters in that era were born with the help of Dr.
I think
Sullivan.
so.
I have a brother and sister born
Yeah,
by him.
So.
We don't have to know when this took place, but it does make the whole interview fall into place if you tell us what year this was.
Well, this was in 1919, in the month of February.
Where were your parents born?
Well, they were both from Scotland. My mother was from Wick, which is way up in the northern part, and my father came from Aberdeen. He wasn't born there, but he left Scotland from Aberdeen to come here.
Were they married before they came here?
No, my mother, her sister, and two brothers came out at the same time, and my father came over alone, and they met in Newport. He worked in New York for some time, and then decided to come up to Newport. And in those days when you came over, as I understand it, there were people here already who sort of showed you the ropes, told you where you could stay and where the work was and so forth.
Did it have to be a family connection? It more or less is now.
No, it didn't in those days. We just came over, and I guess as long as you could support yourself, that's all that counted.
They both were very young.
Yes, yes.
Did they go into service?
No, well, my mother and her sister worked in various estates. My mother worked for Mrs. Safe for several years. Well, my father was a carpenter, and my mother's two brothers were gardeners. So it was ideal for them here. There's a lot of gardeners in Newport. In fact, did I say two brothers or three brothers? I don't know whether I said two or three. But one of them who did stay here worked on various estates, and the last job he had was as a gardener at Newport Hospital. His name was John Campbell, and he was the gardener there. He planted all those beautiful begonias that they had, which they don't have anymore. He happened to see his name in the grist mill not too long ago, where in 1939, I think it was, he had bred a new dahlia, and that was his fort.
With the name Campbell?
No, he gave it the name, I think it was Wheeler, so Mayor Wheeler's wife. This is what they generally did. They named it after some notable person in the city, maybe somebody down the avenue, or just somebody of notability,
Tell me about, if you know anything about the courtship of these two Scottish ancestors of yours.
Well, the courtship, I guess, wasn't long, because the wedding trip consisted of a ride around the Ocean Drive in a horse and carriage. In those days, you didn't, I guess, travel the way you do today on honeymoons. The thing was that you were getting married, and you didn't want to waste any money. So they honeymoon was very short, but it went on in one way, but it went on for 50 years in another way.
Very nice. Were you the first child born?
No, I had an older sister. She was about 3 or 4 years older than I was, and I have a brother who's younger, but he lives down in Shreveport, Louisiana now. But I was in the middle, and
They say that's difficult. Is that difficult?
no, it wasn't for me. It was very good. I can truthfully say I enjoyed growing up in the neighborhood that I was born in. We had a mixture of various nationalities in the neighborhood. There were Italian families, and Irish and Scottish and French. I think of all of them. There were a lot. They were all in the neighborhood, and everybody got along fine. And there were more boys in that neighborhood than girls.
Or maybe you didn't notice the girls then.
Well, there weren't all that. We noticed them, but there weren't very many. It seemed like most families next door to me was an Italian family, and there were 3 boys in it. We had 2 boys and a girl, and there were others that same mix where they had more boys and girls in the family. And it seemed that there were always enough boys around to start a baseball game or a football game or anything you wanted to. There seemed to be so many of them.
Now, as you grew up there on the street, this was the days before going to parks or anything like that. First of all, did your mother go out of the house?
Oh yeah.
To work?
No. When my father and mother were married, my mother stopped working in town, and we lived in this house on the corner of Middleton, as I said, which was owned by the Golden family. And we lived there from the time I was born to before that, this time they were married, up until before the stock market collapsed. And my father had bought a lot on Weaver Avenue from Miss McAskill, who lived in Gibbs Avenue. And he built his own home there, and in which I had a hand in. Everybody helped in some way. And he built the house, and we moved there before the stock market crashed. And I can remember my mother talking to the butcher about the house after we moved in, and he said something to her about, what do you think it'll be worth when it's finished? And she said, oh, at least $5,000. So compared to today's prices, $5,000 was still a lot of money, but even so, you could do things in those days that you can't do today. Do you want me to tell you a little bit about the neighborhood, what it was like?
I'm going to try to get you chronologically coming along. Any time that you want to tell me about the neighborhood, I wanted to find out now, as a little boy, growing up with all these other little boys, what games you played out in the street, because you didn't go to a park.
Yes, we did. We were lucky. We had Freebody Park right in our backyard, so to speak. At that time, Middleton Avenue was a dirt road, and I think, if I can remember correctly, some of the other roads in the area were dirt. But it was unique in another way, because we did have Freebody Park, which was a huge park, wide open, so that we could go over there and climb trees as boys do, and we could play baseball or football or whatever. We could also ride a horse, and if you could catch one, because on Weaver Avenue there were a series of barns, and in these barns the man who we called junk man He had a horse and a wagon. There were 2 or 3 other peddlers who, one that peddled vegetables, another one that peddled fruit. And they all had horses and wagons, as well as a blacksmith shop, which I loved to stop at and watch them shoe the horses and smell the burning hooves. That was a terrific aroma. You don't get that anymore. And then all the people who had horses at that time, and there were still quite a few, would bring them to the shop to have them shod. And you observed different things happening each day that you went by coming from school. How mean some horses could be, and what the blacksmith said to the horse. I picked up a new word. It was my favorite for years. But the games we played there was one called Wiki. You don't see that played anymore. You would draw a circle, and you had a stick like a broom hand, shorter than that type of thing. And then you could take a piece of that, and you tape it both ends of it, a short piece about 4 inches long. And this was the Wiki. Then you drew a line about 8 to 10 feet away from the circle, and the person who was up had the bat, so to speak. And then the other person would throw the Wiki and try to have it land in the circle. And the idea of the batter was to hit it before it could land, and hit it as far away as he could. And then the person who was the pitcher would throw the Wiki back to the circle, and then they would measure off the distance, and that would be points. And whoever scored the 21 points first would win the game. This was a game you don't see anymore.
It was before you started to play baseball.
Yes, we were younger. But
did you get hit by the bats standing around the circle watching? Nobody got hit?
No. Another favorite game were marbles. And there were 2 ways you could play this game. Usually the girls like to play bunny in the hole. They'd make a little hole in the dirt in the sidewalk, and then you would try to roll the marble in the hole. Whoever got the most marbles in there would win. The other one was where you would sit down and put an agate between your legs, and then the others would stand back and hug marbles at the agate, and whoever hit it won the agate. But the person who was sitting down there won the marbles. So it was the other person's turn then to put his agate down and have somebody try to hit it. Well, you could switch that. Instead of using agate, you could use a penny or a nickel or a dime or something like that. That was a little more exciting, because if you got a hold of a nickel, you could go and buy 5 cents worth of candy at the store.
Well, the agates did cost more than the regular marbles.
Oh, yeah. The marbles were clay and the agates were glass. And they were prized because of the size and the colors and so forth. Some of the other games we played were more or less night games. And we'd play after supper. You'd go out and play, and you'd play la-la, leash dogs, or you would play flag, which was a game where you would put one gang on one side of the street and another gang on the other, and have a flag in the middle. And then you would try to capture the flag without getting caught. And then we had another...
Was this a point as more or less like tag?
No, it was you tagged the person, and that's where the flag would stay until somebody else tried to grab it. But the person you tagged or grabbed was a prisoner, and you tried to get it to the other side of to your side, before the other team could grab it and take it to their side. And then we played kick the can, of course, with the can down, and somebody would kick it, and one team, and the other team would run and hide, and they'd have to try to find them. And if they weren't able to find you, and you could sneak in, you could kick the can again and run off and hide. So this could go on all night.
There was one that I went to a dame school here in Newport, and all girls. We played Prisoner's Base, and I never remembered how that was played. Was that too fancy for Middleton Street?
No, it could have been like leash dogs, where you had a jail, and one team would try to capture the other team. Is that the way this game was played?
I can't remember. It was a long time ago. I would love to know a little bit about these children that you all played so beautifully with. They came from a heterogeneous background. Were most of the parents in service in some way to the large estates?
No. For instance, the people who lived next door to us were Capasillis, and Mr. Capasilli was a cobbler. He had a shop on Pleasant Street, which is now gone. Mr. Sullivan, he had two girls and a boy. He was at a shoe store on Thames Street, Sullivan Divine Shoes, across from Eddie's Market, down near Mill. Let's see, Mr. Kosh, there was the father and his son, and then his grandson. That family, Mr. Kosh had this is the old Mr. Kosh, he had a store up on East Bowery Street, and the son worked for either Standard Wholesale or Adelson's. And let me think, the King fellows, they lived over on Berkeley Avenue, and Mr. King was a butler for Mrs. Codman, who later became Mrs. Carlick. There were Mr. Scaldino. He was a barber. He had his own shop. Mr. Dominique, he worked at one time he worked for Egan's Laundry, but later on he worked at Newport Beach, in charge of the cafeteria down there. As I said, my father was a carpenter, and then there was the Anderson family and the Olson, Danielson family. Mr. Danielson was the captain of the Aloha, which was Arthur Curtis James's yacht, and Mr. Anderson was the carpenter, as well as my father. And I think Mr. Casey worked for the city of Newport, and he was a mason, and he had 3 sons. Mr. James, who had several sons, he had a variety store on Bellevue Avenue. He sold newspapers and tobacco and that sort of thing. So that you did have not a mixture of everybody who worked down the avenue, but they all were independent businessmen or
the small businessman that no longer can exist.
That's right. That's right.
Perfectly fascinating as you go over those names to realize the different religions involved. First of all, as you got to the school age, there was no kindergarten.
Yes.
Did you go to kindergarten?
Yes. My sister and I went to Cardington School, which was on Mill Street.
Did all the rest of these children on the street go?
Yeah, depends on which side of the street you live. Some of the kids went to Lenthal School, which was down on the corner of Perry and Spring Street, and some went to Cardington. Then, of course, the others further over went to Carey School. But Cardington and Linfield both had kindergarten.
So that you came back from school, separate schools, and played your games as a neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
Completely.
Right. Mhm.
Those of you that went to Sunday school, was there any discussion? You've got the Irish, the Jewish, the Protestant in that name there. You also had the Italian who doesn't go to the same church maybe as the Irish, as far as the parents go. They went to the same parish. At that point, it was St. Mary's.
It was St. Mary's, right.
And were the cautious synagogue people?
Yeah, definitely.
And then the Scottish went not to Presbyterian?
Yes, but that was odd because it was too far for us to walk, so we went to the Congregational Church on Spring Street. And another reason why I went there was that they had released time in school where you could go from school an hour earlier to go to religious instruction. And the Roman Catholics had catechism, religious instruction. Those were the kids in public school. And then the Protestants had their hour release where they went to religious instruction one day a week. I mean, it was after school. Now, the synagogue, I think, had their own school, independent of them. The same idea.
They do today, I know,
Yeah,
have
they do.
Hebrew school
Right.
one day a week. These children that got along so perfectly beautifully, except I suppose you had your fights. Tell me whether there was any neighborliness amongst these nationalities, the parents. Did they go in and out of each other's houses?
Yes, they visited back and forth. I remember one time that I came home and I said to my mother, can Frank and I, my brother, eat next door at Cap Silly's supper tomorrow night? And then can they come over to our house for supper? She said, oh yeah, So we wanted to sample their type of cooking and they wanted to sample ours, So this did happen. And we visited. Everybody was friendly with everybody else. And everybody talked over the back fence, so they met someplace and talked. We had a peculiar situation, and I don't know of any other neighborhood that had this. There was a man who lived on Merton Road. His name was Connerton. Mr. Connerton was a butcher, and he had what you'd call today a panel truck. It wasn't a van, but it was a closed-in truck. And in that truck, he had on the back of the floor was a butcher block, like a table, and he had all his cleavers and knives and everything hanging up, and he had all his meats hanging up. And one day a week, he would come by with one of the sons, and he'd knock on the door and say, butcher, and my mother would say, well, I'll have a pound of bacon and something else. This was just during the week. But Saturday morning, one of the boys would go ahead of the truck and knock on all the doors in the street and just say, butcher. And he would park sort of in the middle. And all the ladies would come out of their homes to the wagon. And, all right, what do you have today, Mr. Conn? I've got some nice chickens. I've got leg of lamb, or I've got lamb chops, or
In those days, we ate lamb chops in those days.
Right. And so my mother would say, well, I'd like a nice rib roast. So fine. He'd cut her off a rib roast. And it was all done right to your door. Now the same was true with vegetables and fruit. These men would come around in the summer with their horse and wagon. They would call out vegetables, and they'd say bananas or apples or whatever they had, and people would come out. They'd stop and they'd buy whatever they want. He'd weigh it right out for them, and everything was done right on the street right in front of your house. Another convenience they had was that you could pick up the phone and dial the market and put an order over the phone to Eddie's or Tisdale's or whatever, and it would be delivered. But I don't think, there's only one place you can do that now, and I think that's a square deal down on Main Street. But those things are gone.
Always you could charge and deliver.
Yep, always. And they would fill your order exactly the way you wanted it.
I think that's a lovely story. I can see those wives. This is before they put their hairs up in
Yep.
curlers in the morning.
Right.
They came out looking quite nicely. Did your father work for himself, or did he work for someone?
He worked for various contractors. That's the last one he worked for was Bob Nelson, and he worked for Chick Johnson, and he worked for Dolly. What's the other man's name? I can't think of it. Several of them anyway. Some of them were.
These are both house builders and interior work.
They would do. These people did anything. Oh, Tommy Keir was a contractor. Well, for instance, he worked on Coddington School. No, not Coddington, John Clark School. And he worked on Rogers High School when they were rebuilding that up on Broadway. It's now Thompson. He worked on most of the big houses to do repair or alteration. They did a lot of the work when they were having a big party. They would have to lay out a dance floor on the lawn, this kind of thing. He would do new construction if the contractor had a job to construct a new home. Then they would do the new construction. But my father was the old school. He learned his trade, and he had to be a journeyman first before he could become a full-class carpenter. He had to, like an apprentice, he had to serve his time, so to speak. Now you don't have to do anything like that. In order to join the union, you just have to be able to cut a piece of wood and drive a nail in, and you're a carpenter. That's all changed.
Well, it's a shame we don't have the apprentice system anymore.
It's too bad.
It is too
You
bad.
lose a lot of the arts.
Definitely do. Besides your parents, was there any other, and your siblings, were there anyone else living in the house? No, you never had any grandparents in this country?
No.
Did your father ever want you or your brother to go into carpentry?
Oh, definitely. But my mother wouldn't hear of it. She said there's no money in it. But we always thought, well, we'd like to, go into the business with them and develop your own company. But it'd be better to learn something else and earn a better living, because when you're a carpenter, it's like any other trade. You work when there's work, and you don't when there isn't.
After you went on to school, say you went to Coddington.
Yeah.
And how many years was that?
That was for the first 5 years.
And
well, 6 years counting kindergarten.
And your brother and sisters both went with you. during the time that you overlapped in the same school
Well, my
years?
sister did, but my brother went to Lenthal. I don't remember why, unless there were too many children at the time and they had to spread them out more. But as I said, it was there through the 5th grade, and then you went to John Clark for the 6th, 7th, and 8th, which was the grammar school age, and then to Rogers on Broadway for the last 4. And of course, everybody ended up at Rogers eventually, except those that elected to go to De La Salle or St. Catherine's. But most of the kids finished high school and went on into higher education if they had the wherewithal. If they didn't, then they automatically went out employment somewhere. But I can say that I was never unemployed. I worked from the day I got out of high school. I got a job working for, at that time it was Avery's Music Store.
Now, what year was this that you finished Rogers?
36, 1936, yeah.
And the Depression had hit your family,
Mm-hmm.
your father.
Yeah.
But was he recovering from that at that particular point?
Definitely. We had another peculiar situation in our neighborhood. In every neighborhood there were neighborhood stores, but we had one on the corner of East Barry and Middleton. It's still there. This was run by a man named Ross, who was he was a butler. He married a woman who was a Mrs. Tozier, much older than him, but she owned the building and she owned the, so he ran
He
the
married
store.
well.
He did. But I don't know that he was very happy, but he ran this store and he carried a lot of people during the Depression. And people who were unemployed were a little bit upset with the government employees who had a paycheck every week, but a lot of them wouldn't spend it in Newport. They'd go to Fall River and spend it, and people would be a little upset because in order to make the wheels turn, you had to put a little oil on them, you know. And if they had spent their money in Newport, it would have meant a little more money in circulation.
we were talking about the roughness of,
Yeah,
of
the
the
Depression.
Depression.
Um, when that hit, we were living at Bellevue Avenue. Yeah, we were in there. And they were going to do over Freedom Park, which was a park that had a low corner to it where a lot of water would accumulate in heavy rain. It had a wooden fence, a high wooden fence all around it, and a lot of trees and hedges around the outskirts. So they decided what they would do, the WPA, in order to help people, would be to do Freebie Park over, so they would create some employment. Well, they tore up the whole field and put drains in it. They built the stone wall around it, and they built the stadium. Well, at the time, my father was trying to get work, and he finally did get work working at Freebie Park when they were building the forms to build the stadium, because it's all concrete reinforced. So he did get some work there, and gradually things began to turn around. But you had to do a lot of things that you didn't do before. For instance, in order to save you money for things that you had to have, like food, my mother made her own soap. She would rework garments in any way she could to see that you were properly clothed, but without spending a lot of money on it, so that the money, as I said, could be used to pay the grocery bills. So you made do. But we were, in another way, we were lucky. We had some chickens. My mother was raised on a farm in Scotland, so she could, her brothers were all gardeners. So she had a pretty good green thumb. And so she had my father build this shed in the yard, and we enclosed it, had a wire run for the chickens, and we kept 12 to 18 hens, so that we had fresh eggs all the time. And as the hens got a little older, they quit laying, we would go in the pot. So
Never sold any. They were all for your own.
Yeah. And her sister and her husband, they lived down on East Street, and they had chickens too. So you could get along. And a lot of people, Carl Barstell, who owned the garage on East Forest Street, he lived right next to us, and he had chickens. And his chickens laid their eggs out in a lot, and he never knew it. He didn't have them cooped, so that you had to provide nesting areas for them, boxes and all. So, and then periodically we'd have a hen hatch out a brood. If we didn't do it, my uncle had an incubator, so we'd have him hatch out a bunch for us, so that we would always have chickens. And Mr. Trifero had a lot, we call it the circus lot, because the circus had played there once or twice. And he had a cow and calf, and he had chickens. Mr. Reynolds, who lived on the corner of Bath Road, it's now Memorial Boulevard in Middleton, and he had a cow. And Mrs. Codman had 3 or 4 cows. And Mrs. Safe had a cow. And so once in a while, somebody's cow would get loose, and you'd find it in your yard or something. It used to be a lot of fun. And horses the same way. They'd get loose sometimes, and you'd find a couple of horses out in your yard grazing.
Well, you started to say earlier, and then we went on to something else. This was when you talking about the blacksmith shop and what fun to smell it and see it as you went by. But you did catch the horses then.
I'll tell you an experience we had with one horse. This horse belonged to the junk man, and it was really a bag of bones because it looked like it was suffering from malnutrition. But a lot of them used to turn them loose in Trinity Park because it was all fenced in. So Mr. Golden had a barn that they used for garaging cars, and in it on one side he had 2 or 3 carriages that were then unused and some harness. So we decided one day we would catch the junk man's horse, and I said, well, I'll get a bit because there's a bit in the barn, and we get the bit and put a rope on it for reins, and we got the horse and got the bit in its mouth. So he managed to get on this bag of bones, and that horse walked out into the middle of this huge puddle of water and just stayed put. He would not move, so we had to get off into the water. We were stuck. So no more chasing the junk man's horse. We learned our lesson.
I am fascinated that as late as in the 30s, there were cows in this part of Newport.
We were. And another thing on the horses, we had the horse show at the casino, and all of the barns on Weaver Avenue, there were quite a few, were all rented out to people who were bringing horses for the horse show. And there was one section there, the stables are still there, but they were converted to garages. They were all newly built just for the horse show, for the horses to be stabled. And they would fill those up, of course, and then some of them would take their horses into Trinity Park to exercise them. But this was just before, I guess, the stock market crash, because after that, everything came to a screeching halt. But these were beautiful horses. I used to spend a lot of my time up there.
Well, now, did the grooms that came with the horses, where did they house themselves?
Right in the stable.
They lived with them.
Yeah, there was room up on the lofts, where they could sleep. A lot of them stayed right there in the stables. But in the summer,
didn't worry about the plumbing.
No, a lot of the people in our neighborhood rented rooms. I talked about bed and breakfast. It's nothing new in Newport because everybody did it, and we had a regular.
But they did more than the breakfast too. They did the whole boarding.
Well, in some cases they did, in some of the bigger ones, but most of the neighborhood houses, they just had rooms. There were very few people my mother would let in the kitchen. She was fussy about that. But anyway, we had a regular clientele, and we never took anybody who didn't come recommended by somebody we knew. And if you had somebody come who was recommended, but they hadn't made a reservation, then we would call a neighbor and ask if they had room, and then send them over. And they didn't take anybody unless they were recommended. So you didn't have anybody doing anything that wasn't proper. We had a family, well, there were 2 brothers, Lindgren, from New York, and they came up every summer. And I remember one time they went on a drive to that area called Green Bridge, I think it is, where the salt marsh is. And they must have had 2 big pails of blue paddlers. And they brought them home, and we cooked them up, and we sat there in the kitchen just picking meat.
They don't grow that way anymore.
No.
The crab, I never hear of anyone eating a crab.
No, you don't find them. It used to be able to catch them right off the Ocean Drive, go down on the shore and put a piece of fish on a string and put it over there, and you get a bunch of them.
There are a lot of things that are not the way they used to be.
That's right, yeah, yeah.
I think we could go on a long time on our questions are in groups, and we can always keep going back and forth, so it doesn't make any difference. Let's skip quickly, because we finished mostly the education. You did not go any further than Rogers.
Right.
Was there any discussion at that time in 1936 about whether or not you would go further in your education?
Well, I think there might have been, but the problem was that the money, you were just coming out of a depression, and nobody had accumulated any amount of money so that you could afford to go to college. The only way that you could probably do it would be to work days and go nights or something of that nature. But there were very few, unless somebody had somehow put something away some time back, we were able to get there. Later on, I suppose I could have when I came home from the service under the GI Bill, but I was already working and already had a job. So.
Well, now let's. Can you tell me anything between Rogers and going into the service?
Uh-huh.
You said you had a job the minute you got out of
Yes.
Rogers.
Well, I got, when I graduated, the day I graduated, there was a man who was managing Avery Music Store who was going with a girl who was the daughter of a friend of my father's. And she brought him right up to the house when I graduated and introduced him. He's got a job for you, you know, so I had a job. And before that, I worked for the Saturdays and after school. I used to work for a lady on John Street named Clara Lake. And she was a widow who lived all alone. And she was, at that time, she was 80-some years old, I think. And I would go in and, on the way to school in the morning and take the ashes down and bring her up a fresh pot of coal. And on the way back, I'd do the same thing. And if she had any errands, I would do her errands for her. And then Saturdays, if she wanted, I would wash windows or do a little painting or in the spring dig up her garden for her and this sort of thing. Before that, when school was out in the summer, I worked at Easton's Beach. And I worked at the Newport Country Club for several summers, caddying. And as I said, I always worked. And I had a little gardening on the side for some people that I knew. So there was always money that was all mine. I could earn 50 cents or $1 here or there. And I remember when we were in school down at John Clark, we come home for lunch. A bunch of us would race from John Clark up to the casino because Mr. Jones, he had 2 children, a daughter and a son, and they were both learning how to play tennis. And they always needed a caddy. So when they were having their lessons, Dan Kenny was the tennis pro at the casino at the time. And whoever got there first would get the job to do the caddying, you know. So we caddied for a while, and then you get your money and tip, for it. You go to Gorton's store, which was right next to it, and buy a present for my mother, a pound cake or something like that, and take it in. But that was a lot of fun. And Buddy Jones, do you know him?
I don't think I do.
He was a fireman on the base, but he's retired now. but they lived up here for a while on Rhode Island Avenue, but they lost a lot of money in the stock market, but they survived, and Buddy got a job as a fireman, and his sister is living in California. I think she's back here now. I can't remember if they're married yet. But those little jobs, you know, kept you going right along. And after I worked in the music store, it wasn't any big salary. It was something like $6 a week. And then I worked in the corner grocery store on East Bowery Street for a short time because the owner's wife was pregnant and he needed something to help, so I worked in there. And when about the time came for me to leave there, I went to work in the bank at the Equity National Bank on Main Street, Green Street, and got a job as a bookkeeper. So I always did work for the same bank, except when it was bought out in 1950 by Hospital Trust. It was still the same, except to change the name, you might say. So that's where I stayed until I retired.
We'll get into that when we go on. I want to know how much your religious education meant to you. Did you have any special? You said you went to the Congregational Church, and I feel it would be interesting to compare in these various neighborhoods how much religion meant. We've already discussed in your neighborhood, everyone went to a different place, and you really, how many of you went down to the Congregational Church? Just your family?
Yes, it was one of the family. Plus, they were a little older than me, but that was John James.
And they,
on Annandale Road. Amy, who's now, they went to Congregation. But there weren't that many from our area. When, as I said, when we were older, then we started to go to the Presbyterian Church where we actually belonged, where my mother and father were members of that church, and where they were married, we were baptized, and so forth.
so you never had to go through the Presbyterian Sunday School you didn't have to learn that.
Well, yeah, we did, because we went every Sunday, the three of us, Margin, my brother and sister, myself, and this was after we got a little older, and it wasn't that much older when we started hiking to the Presbyterian Church.
That was a long walk.
That was a long walk, is right. But we enjoyed it there. We had the rector, I guess, at that time was Mr. Cost. And we enjoyed him and his wife, Mrs. Cost, and his companion. So she had the Young People's Fellowship, the Young People's Group, which was a good-sized group. And we met every Sunday night. So we went, as we got older, into high school. Then we went into the fellowship group, and we'd go to Sunday school, church in the morning, come home, have dinner, and in the evening we'd go to fellowship. So it was pretty much an all-day affair.
Well, there wasn't anything else probably that you were allowed to do.
Well,
were you strictly brought up?
Yeah, for a while.
No games.
No
that
games,
were rowdy.
no movies on Sundays, and there was a lot of things like that. Though the Scottish people and they still do it today, over in Hebrides. They're pretty strict. You don't dare to do anything on Sunday, because that's not the way. And that's the way it was here for a while. They're pretty strict. And the man who was the superintendent of Sunday school, he was pretty strict when we were in Sunday school. The young people wanted to have what was it, cider and donuts, something like that. And he wouldn't hear of it because he said, you take that cork out of that, it starts to ferment and you can't have it. And you couldn't have anything like playing whist or anything.
No cards.
No cards. No dancing in the church property at all. But now it's changed now. People begin to see that this is pretty stupid.
I think that we've pretty well got this biographical part. Where did you meet your spouse?
Well, I met her, we were at the YMCA on Mary Street, and where we spent a lot of time. And she had a group, it's called the North End Group.
Now tell me why they were the North End group.
Well, they came from the North End of town, so they call themselves the North Enders.
They weren't the first warders.
No, well,
They weren't pointers.
no, they were off Broadway.
Because that is an interesting thing that we have not, when we were making the neighborhoods of Newport, we did not use the word North Ender, and that's why I want to know what a North Ender is.
Yeah, they were considered out in off Broadway area,
Out of Broadway.
Yeah, out of Broadway.
Including Middletown.
Yeah, you could almost say so, but it was mostly Newport people in this group.
It was Dudley Avenue, Newport at that particular time. I knew somebody that lived on Dudley Avenue, and we never thought of it as Middletown, but it probably was. Because
Well, they
it's
could
beyond
have been
Calvert.
considered North Enders, though, because they did
They would have
take
come
in
in
a wider
largest,
group.
of
Yeah.
course.
But they were having a play, and they were rehearsing at the Y, and I don't know whether they put it on down there. They were put on
Explain
plays too.
where this Y was.
Oh, it's on Mary Street, right opposite Clark Street. Was the YMCA. It isn't today. It's moved to Middletown, but they had a large hall upstairs with a stage, and this is where the group were rehearsing. And I saw this girl, and I asked this friend of mine who it was, and he told me. That's what they were. Oh. So I'll tell you right now, that's the girl I'm going to marry. So I said, you know her, you tell her I'd like to go out with her. So I said, why don't you tell me a little bit about her? So she worked for Dr. Moody as a dental assistant, and there was another girl who worked for another dentist, her name was Grady. And I said, well, why don't we go on a double date? Okay, so he talked to both of them because they were both in his class in school. So we arranged for this date, and of course, when she told her father that she was going out with this McAskill, where does he go to church? He goes to church. Oh. Scottish, isn't he? Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So that was all set. We got over the big hurdle. So we had our first date. And after that, it was quite frequently. And because then the war came along, and I was drafted. So 3.5, 4 years later, when I came home, then we got married.
She waited for you.
Yep. We did. Which was a little unusual, I guess.
It really is.
Yeah.
What did she do during those years that you were away? Or did you come back? I don't know what kind of service. Did you go, where were you in the Army?
Well, I went into at that time they called it the Army Air Force. And we left Newport and went up to Fort Devens to have our inoculations and get our uniforms. And then we were put on a train and sent down to Biloxi, Mississippi to this Keesler Field that they had just constructed down there. And that's where we had our basic training, learning which was our left and which was our right, and this sort of thing, how to take orders. From there, a lot of fellows were sent to school. Some of them elected radio school, engine school, propeller school, and so forth. We were assigned to an air depot group, which was a group of headquarters supply and repair squadrons. We were sent to Macon, Georgia, at the Herbert Smart Municipal Airport, where we initiated, got set up, got all our people together. This is 36, 37, 38. We went from Warner Robins, from Macon Airport to Warner Robins, which is just outside of Macon, which was another new field. And there we finally became a full unit. We left Warner Robins and went to Camp Dix. Stayed there for a while in the freezing winter, in the snow and tents, until we were able to ship out because the Germans had the ports blockaded with submarines. And we left in January and headed for Casablanca. The 38th, the 37th went to Casablanca. The 36th went to England. So we landed in Casablanca and stayed there for a short while, and then we went from Casablanca to Oran by boxcar, overnight trip. That was fun. That was the 40 and 8, 40 men and 8 mules. And we stayed in Oran for a while, and then D+1 we landed in Naples. And we stayed in Naples for some time. We left Naples for France, landed on the beach at Saint-Tropez, went into Marseille, and the war went so fast at that time that Patton was on a rampage. So we left everything for the French Air Force and went to Pisa. And we stayed in Pisa for a while, left Pisa and went to a place called Gioia del Cola, which was down in the southern part of Italy again, down not too far from Bari. There we redeployed the 15th Air Force back to the States, and then they were going to go to the China-Burma, India area. And the war ended in Europe at that time. And then we were getting ready to come home and then go to China, Burma, India area when that war, the Japanese war, ended, and came home. At at that time we got engaged and shortly after we were married.
I think that is it's a marvelous thing that you knew 6 years before,
Yeah.
and that both of you really put your minds to doing that. So you were married as soon as you came back from overseas. Did you have any children?
Yes, we had 3. John Kirk, who was the oldest, and then Wendy, girl in the middle, and then Robert Scott, who was the youngest.
Now that's the same way that your parents had the 3 children, a boy and a girl and a boy. You were brought up.
Yeah, right.
No, it was
It was girl, boy, boy.
All right, now, all right. Were the children born in the hospital?
Yes, in Newport here.
And was it the same doctor that delivered you?
No, Dr. Brownell was the man we elected to be our family doctor.
And you brought the children home. But at this point, had you moved from Weaver Street?
Yes, when we were getting married, we knew we had to have a place for our own. So the question is, if we build a place or find a place that we can move right into, well, my father would have built the house for us if we could find a building site. So we were looking around, and lo and behold, there was an ad in the paper. There was a house for sale. And I don't recall whether it didn't give the street, it gave the area. And so I answered the ad into the daily news box. I didn't get a response. So I wrote again. I said, if you're really serious about selling this house, call me. And I gave my number. So I got a call, and it was Bill Bean, and they owned a house on Slocum Street. So I said, great. So I got a hold of my wife-to-be, and I said, come on, I want you to see this house. So she saw it. We gotta have it, you know, because it was exactly what we wanted. It had a fireplace, and it had a nice sunroom like this, not a separate porch, but part of the house.
So you were both looking at this house on Slocum Street, and it looked absolutely ideal.
Perfect for us, perfect, yeah. So we made the deal, and we bought the house and got married, but we had a little time beforehand so that we could do a little redecorating, and we could get the furniture ordered and everything to come and be delivered, so it would be all there when we got back from our honeymoon. And it worked out perfectly. We were married in St. George's Church, Rhode Island Avenue, and then we went on a honeymoon to Washington, D.C. And in my car that was on blocks for 4 years in Barstell's garage, we got there and back, okay, fine. And then we began life at 22nd Street. At that time, my wife was working over the naval base for the Naval Supply over there, and of course I was working in the bank. So we were so to speak, off and running. And she worked for the government, I think it was almost 5 years, and she retired so that she could get her money out of her retirement fund. Otherwise, she'd have to wait until, I don't know, 60 years old or something to get it. So she took that so that we could use that as part of our start in married life. And after that, she didn't work up until the time that the boys and the girls were ready to go to college. And so she worked for Parade's card and party shop up in the Bellevue Shopping Center to make sure that we had enough to see them all through school.
The three children started off then on Slocum Street. How was their childhood different from yours as far as the street, their street play? They did not have quite the number of children.
No, there weren't as many, but they found other children to play with. Wendy had a girl who lived behind us, Martha Godoyan, and they became very firm and fast friends, which they still are. And the two boys, they played with their cousins, my brother's children. They lived over on Sylvan Street, and which wasn't too far away, and they had them, plus the other children in the neighborhood. So, and they played things that they played at that time, which were more like what they watched on television, I think. Not so much of what the things that we learned to do, but the things that they saw on television. And they played basketball and the usual type of thing that the kids get into. And they went to through high school and went to college. They did very well in school. They all did. No complaints. And Scotty's still trying to find his niche in life, but he'll make it.
They have a much harder time, I think, today because they have been taught that they must do their own potential and they mustn't do what they're told to do. They must
do what their thing.
Their thing. Their thing. After you and your wife got established with all these children there, did your social life in the neighborhood stay neighborhood, or did it turn more to family and friends that you'd had before? On Slocum Street, in other words, did your wife keep more to her friends and you to the, well, after you'd been away 4 years, of course, it's almost like coming back a stranger, isn't it?
It is, because some of your friends have gone.
Or you've outgrown them, or...
Yeah, that's true. Or they've gotten married, and they've had new friends, so to speak. So that the old ways have changed because you're not doing the same things you used to do.
No. I was just wondering that did you and your wife start out as a separately as a couple there in that neighborhood, having to start the neighborhood all over again, even though it was almost what you've grown up in?
I think so, because that idea is starting over.
Was it as close in the 1950s as it had been in the 1920s?
I don't think so in the beginning. That is, when the children were little and growing up. You still had a little bit of religious bigotry. And if somebody went to one church and somebody went to another church,
there were things that were said that people said because their parents said it. And that has all changed now. People are beginning to understand that, I don't want to get into a religious discussion, but the things they used to say aren't true. And they didn't realize they only thought they were true because they were told that. They never really gave it.
But now
any
you
thought.
never gave me any idea that there was any of, in fact, as little children
Yeah.
playing with these 3 or 4 different religious backgrounds. Were you brought up then to say ugly things about the others?
No, we just gave them tit for tat. I mean, if somebody said you were a black Protestant, then you had to give them something back. And if they said that you weren't Catholic, well, you'd have to ask them to look it up in the dictionary and see what the word meant. And it's always been that way, but now the Roman Catholics, and it's no secret, they call the Jewish people Christ killers, and they will always hate the Jew, Well, they seem to forget, or they never gave it any thought, that Christ was a Jew, and so was St. Joseph, and all the
Mary
others.
and
They
the
were
rest
all
of them.
Jewish people, and they went to the
Yeah.
synagogue. They didn't go to St. George's Church or St. Mary's Church. They went to the synagogue, and so we had to tell them straight off, but my children would say that this is so-and-so's kid said this, and so we would say, well, you tell them this, and it helped. And today it's altogether different.
So you really believe that there is much less bigotry now than
Much less.
Which, isn't that nice, because there are not terribly many things that we can say that are better today than they used to be, but that certainly is very nice.
I found that the people in our neighborhood are all good Christian people. I think that Pope Paul, when he opened the windows and let some fresh air in and some sunshine, I think he changed the attitudes of a lot of people, and I'm grateful to him for that, because I think it made a great difference in the way they talk to other people. I found that our particular area now is completely changed.
Do you think in your area now you have as diverse a population as you told me about in the 1920s?
It's still a mixture.
Do you, except for the names, is there as much European feeling, or are they all second, third generation now without any European feeling background?
Yeah, they're all second,
Americans.
third. Yeah,
They're all Americans, no matter what the sound of their
right.
name is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
This is the way it's
No,
changed.
no immigrants have come in that you are particularly aware of.
No, not in that area, no. They're all second or third generation.
The Portuguese never came to that particular area.
Yes, we had Portuguese people.
Because they're the only ones that I think of now as coming over all the time, but
Yeah.
I always have the feeling they're going with family out to the northern part of the island when they come in.
A lot of them, yeah, more so than in Newport, I think, because and more in areas like Bristol, I think. Bristol's had a lot of immigrants.
They're coming for the land more than
right.
to have space.
Yeah.
Can you think of any kind of little, you will as soon as you go home, think of some reminiscence about the neighborhood, childhood that you went through or even today's neighborhood interaction, because we're going to stop talking about the personal actions, your memories of that, and then we're going to go into specific subjects, your memories of specific subjects. But I'd love to know if there's anything more before we stop this morning that really is a neighborhood memory that couldn't have happened down at the Point or on the Point, or couldn't have happened down in the Fifth Ward.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that I can tell you about, but from my own memories, and this is that in this area, there were so many things that other areas didn't have. One of them was that we had a dairy, the Aquidneck Dairy. It's long gone now. They had horses and wagons that they delivered the milk with. And when I was in school, the horses were stabled down on Pelham Street. And we used to run over from school to Pelham Street so that we could ride on the wagon up the hill to the Aquidneck Dairy, and that was on Two's Court, just off Old Beach Road. And some of the kids that came from school, they worked for the milkman. They would, they say, hop for him. They would ride on the wagon, and they would drop the milk off at the different houses. I never did that on the wagon, because the milkman that I went with was Bill Coughlin, who had a truck. And I think he was the only one that had a truck, because he had the Ocean Drive as his route. So I would meet him and go part way on his route with him, dropping off milk, in different houses. You got to know that Mrs. So-and-so got a quart and a pint, maybe a jar of cream or whatever, but they would put a note in the milk bottle and tell the milkman what they wanted, if they wanted any extras. And he always had to carry half pints of cream and pints and pasteurized milk and certified grade A milk and sweet and salted butter. This kind of, he had to have that, even though people didn't get it on a daily basis, because you never knew what the note was going to say. But on Saturdays and holidays and this type of thing, when he delivered around the drive, we went the full route with him. And we used to, remember when we go around the drive, Bill would make home brew. Now, a lot of people made home brew, including my father. And when we'd go around the drive, we'd all jump off the truck and look along in the bushes to see if we could find any empty beer bottles. And then we'd collect them, and then he would take those home and clean them up and use them for his home brew. And anytime we got a bottle that was a store bottle that was worth 5 cents, because you could redeem that at a store. So that was ours. He let us keep all those. So we didn't get a pay, but we'd get a jar of cream or a pound of butter or something else, and we finished, which was great. It was worth something. That was one of the things. I told you about the butcher and the vegetable man, but I didn't tell you about Mr. Peckham from Paradise Avenue, who was related to the Peckham brothers, the quarry people. He had chickens, and he used to deliver eggs. And before we had our own chickens, he would come to the house on Milton Avenue, and my mother would buy her eggs from him. And then Mr. Barker, who was a farmer from out in the country, he would come in he had a wagon, and he had a sleigh in the winter. And that was all closed in, just like it would be sitting in a car. And it had a windshield, and had a slot at the top where the rains came inside, and he would come in from the country to visit different people for delivery of vegetables and whatnot. And so he was coming to the house.
Can you imagine now there being enough snow on the ground to have a sleigh? Isn't it amazing?
Yeah. But there was the street, as I said, was dirt, so the water wagon would come through and wet it all down in the summer. We had an arc light on the corner, and this was one of those big electric lights that had to be lowered periodically, and it had a little crank on the pole. The man had the handle for it, and he'd lower the thing down, and he had to change the carbon stick in there, which made the light, and that was interesting. There was a man who kept his car in Bostel's garage, and when he came out of the garage, he'd walk up the street part way, and he'd stop and he'd bend down and put something on the curb, and we'd race up there because we knew it was a quarter. And then other times when he came out, he'd just put his hand in his pocket. We'd always stand around. He'd throw it up. Whatever change he had, he just threw it up, and it was a big scramble, to get the pennies and nickels that he threw up.
You children never knew who this man was?
No, he lived on Dresser Street. He was a summer resident.
Mm-hmm.
We don't remember who he was. We didn't know. We were too small to know.
Wasn't that an exciting thing, though?
Yeah,
good for him.
Right. And another thing we used to do when they had tennis at the casino, all the limousines would be parked on Bellevue Avenue, other cars, and if they were unattended, we'd ask the person, "Can we mind your car?" So they'd say yes. So we'd have to remember which car we were minding, because there were people who'd come along and steal the radiator caps,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. So for minding the car, they'd give us some money. So there was a lot of, and we used to go up to the horse shows, of course, when we had those, and then they also had the flower show, and all this is gone. And this is why I say this area was so unique from the rest of the city. There were all these things going on. Freebody Park was an open field for years, but they had things going on with it. They had boxing matches at night, sometimes they had wrestling. They had big firework display over there one year. They had a home show where they had set up like a huge wooden area, and they had on display all the new electrical appliances, stoves, refrigerators, and gas stoves.
How did they do that without having any cover?
They just
They just hoped that there wasn't going to be any
just
rain.
took a chance, yeah. And they had, it seems to me, they had a dog show there. There was something, even in later years when they had done the park over, they had a cinder track and they had racing cars over there, small midget races. But there was always something going on in Freedom Park. Baseball, my mother was crazy about baseball and boxing. She'd take us over at night, and she didn't have a babysitter, so we had to go. She'd be over there watching the ball game or watching the fights. And then, of course, the trolley cars were still around at that time, and they ran to the beach. And I remember my aunt's husband's family lived on Bliss Road. She was a Campbell, but she married a Campbell. The Campbells lived on Bliss Road, and out behind their house, they had a big area, field, and they kept a cow, too. But they were going to have a clam bake, and we rode the trolley from down Bath Road down to the foot of the hill to like Eustis Avenue, and we would walk through Eustis to the Campbell's house, and they had this big clam bake out in the back. And I remember feeling a little bit embarrassed because two of the girls, now this was in the 20s, this was the flapper era, they had these short skirts, the long beads, the cloche hats with the curls.
It's called spit curls.
Spit curls, and rouged up cheeks, and smoking cigarettes. And I was sort of hiding in the seat. And those were my uncle's sisters, but they're great people, but that was the way it was in those days, And all you could think was, wow, fast ladies.
And yes, and you didn't want to have
No,
anything
right.
to do with them.
The other thing that I remember is about that neighborhood was the, what was it I was going to say? I can't remember. The Freebie Park had a little bit of history. It was an open-air theater and beer garden. And they had a big fire, and it burned down. And there was an ice house right next to it, and that burned down. And then it became, after that, nothing but a ballpark.
Now, this is long before your time.
That was before I was born, but they also had a big fire down at Easton's Beach, and I don't quite remember that, except one time going down there to look, and then the Easton's Beach was rebuilt, and then, of course, that was what was then was wiped out by the '38 hurricane. That was completely wiped out. But all the time, up to the '38 hurricane, Easton's Beach was a place to go on a Sunday or on a day off or anything, because there were always crowds of people. There was always something going on. The boats came down from Providence, and people came off the boat onto the bus or the trolley and went to the beach. And it was just packed jam and something going on all the time. So it was a good place to go.
I think that we will use. I think that would be a good subject. I think we've had enough today, don't you?
Get close.
Did you ever participate in the outer community? Were you ever politically interested in doing any?
No,
thing?
but when you mean in the community, you mean being involved with any, let's say, outside activities?
That's right.
Like community chest or something like that, well, which is now the United Fund. I did some of that United Fund work. I went to several places to speak about the fund and what its purpose was and how it operated. I can't remember. It's been so long since being involved in anything like that. But I don't think I did get involved in anything other than, well, a member of the Newport Discussion Club, which was a group of men that met for the few months in the winter to hear a speaker on a particular subject and then discuss what he talked about afterwards. It was a dinner meeting.
Is that still going?
No, that's defunct now. It was held at the YMCA again on Mary Street, and it ran for quite a number of years, and they had enough membership so they filled the hall, and it was all businessmen. Whether or not they belonged to other civic organizations like Rotary or Lions, they all belonged to the discussion club because it was something they all enjoyed. The topics were quite current. We had speakers from the War College and from University of Rhode Island and from other areas also.
Why do you think that stopped? Because of the Y not having the place, or people just got tired of being intellectual?
I think that the old club members were dying off or weren't going anymore, and the younger ones didn't seem to be interested. They did get some younger people in, but I don't think they tried husbands and wives to see if that would generate interest. And it did. We did have one big meeting at the Hotel Viking. Margaret Mead spoke at one, and the other one was something everybody was interested in at the time was hurricanes. And that's because we'd had that '38 hurricane, and that was quite interesting, and husbands and wives went to those. And but that gradually died off. And another thing I think that
tended to kill it was the fact that the suppers at the Y were put on by the auxiliary of the Y, and they cooked everything right there, and they served it, and it was beautiful. But after that, we had to have a caterer, and people didn't seem to think the food was quite what it used to be.
And then it got
So,
a great deal more expensive.
I think so. And then that's the younger people too, as they came in, they wanted to have a drink before dinner and this sort of thing. So because on the wire you didn't have liquor, so they started to hold them at the Viking Hotel, but the interest just wasn't there. The crowd got smaller and smaller. It got harder and harder to get new members. We worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, but it just
When did it stop?
Oh dear, this was after Mr. Gold retired as secretary, and George Sorrento's was secretary, and it was a few years after that. Now, I
As
don't
late as the
recall.
60s?
Yeah, I would think so.
And it had gone on many years before that?
Yeah, many years before. It was a good organization, because there weren't that many meetings. It wasn't that expensive. I think membership was maybe $15, and that paid for your dinner and the speaker. Plus, we tried to get the speakers for free, but a lot of them came that way. United Nations speakers, there was never any charge for them. War college people, professors that were lecturing over there was never any charge for them. URI, there was no charge, but once in a while.
Do you think there'd ever be any way that a few of you old-timers could stimulate it again, or do you think they're just... People like to stay home and watch their television
Well, that's
sets.
it. Now,
And they get the same kinds of people if they want to tune in on the
that's right.
television
Yeah,
set.
and they can get sport networks, and they can get movies. They've got a multiple choice now, and I think this is what's holding them home.
It's too bad, because it was a lovely way to get a nice feeling of community and
That's
friendship
right,
that you
yeah.
wouldn't otherwise. Aside from the discussion club and Community Chest, most of your life was spent downtown working and home working on the grounds
That's right,
and
with
being
my
a family
Family
man.
and your house. When you own a house, you're kind of...
You can keep busy if you know
Keep
if you know
busy,
how to
right.
do it.
That's right.
I didn't find out whether during your childhood whether you ever went out to work with your father in carpentry. Did you learn any of the craft
I learned from him at home, but not
out
out
with
on the
him?
job, no.
I can't ask you about World War I, since you were born just about a month or two after it had ended. Did the First World War make any difference in your family as far as what you have been told by them?
No. I think the effect of World War I was a lot less than World War II, because I think World War II people were more dependent on the supermarket than they were during World War I. And World War I, of course, at that time everybody could grow food, which World War II, people didn't know anything about that.
And of course, we seem to think that it was such a long war, and it was really such a short war
That's
as far
true.
as the years go.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me when your father became a United States citizen.
I can't think now whether it was just before. Yeah, it was. It was before World War I, because I remember my mother became a citizen afterwards in the early 20s. But my father, I think, was before World War I.
None of your family had any connections with the war?
With World War I?
Yes.
No.
No. I suppose it wouldn't have affected when you were a child playing around the casino or making change up there at the casino in your various little jobs. Did you foresee any changes in the summer colony? Did you notice any changes as the years went on?
Well, the big changes, of course, were noticed at the time of the Depression and shortly thereafter, when a lot of the people down the avenue who depended on their invested income for their livelihood lost a great deal of their assets and therefore had to curtail their spending. And a lot of people were laid off and houses were closed until the economy started to turn around. Now, while I was in high school, it was freshman year, about when caddying at the country club, things had started to come back again. And there were a lot of the people, again, coming back to Newport. The older people, they got rid of their big houses. The younger people didn't want them. So they were more interested in either renting something or having an apartment that they could come to during the summer. This is where a place like the Virginia King Hotel or the Forest Cottages would be the type of thing they were looking for. The big houses, several of them were given away or sold and cut up into apartments. And I think some of these people who came in for the summer could rent an apartment and be still in that same area.
I suppose also there was a new kind of summer person coming in. Those that had done well by the wartime era, but you would, by that time, you would have only downtown at the bank. You wouldn't have seen them up in your part of town.
Yeah, well, there was one example of somebody who might say made a comeback. One was Mr. Gillette, who gave his house on Poker Point Avenue to the Roman Catholic Diocese. It's now Salve Regina. This was their main house, Hooper Court, because he was practically wiped out. In fact, during the Depression, he was selling grapes and whatever from his greenhouses to get some money. But apparently he was successful during the Second World War because he built a new house on Bellevue Avenue, which is now owned by Mrs. Aiken, the mother of Mrs. Von Bulow. And he built that because he completely recovered financially due to World War II. There's one example of somebody who did come back, but another example of somebody who didn't, who just gave up, was the Belcourt Castle house that is owned by the Tinneys now. That was closed and had been closed for years, and it was pretty well neglected until they bought it and turned it into the museum they have today. A lot of the places that house on Budlong's on the point that was completely empty for years after that, and it's long been torn down now. And during the war, that was used. They had anti-aircraft batteries and some artillery pieces in there, but those places were all part of the summer colony, and because of the Depression, disappeared. They just figured it was cheaper probably to lock it up and pay the taxes or whatever to get it.
The Budlong one maybe had a fire, did it?
Well, it did.
After it had been emptied.
Oh yeah, it had been neglected for years and just locked up. There were several around like that that I can remember. And they just went down and finally were torn down and done away with.
Well, now while we're talking about the changes in the summer colony, we might start talking about the restoration and redevelopment and talk a little about some of those places that have been torn down, starting on the drive, that are condominium now.
Yeah. I would like to talk a little bit about the Newport Restoration Foundation because...
All right, should we start on the Restoration Foundation, or shall we whichever way you want it. We're going to talk restoration too. Let's start on that.
Well, of course, everybody knows that Doris Duke was the prime mover, but one who really got her interested and started on it was a man named John Brown, and he lived in a little house on Elm Street, and he was primarily someone who was interested in old books, rare books, but he had been trained as an architect, and he had restored a house on Bridge Street some time back, and he got fairly close to Doris Duke and talked to her about the older houses in Newport that were just going to ruin. And she thought enough of the thing that she said she would be willing to back it, start a foundation, which he did. And they started then to acquire older Newport homes, the colonial period, the 16th and some 17th century houses, and started to restore them. They were quite successful, but it had forced the prices of some of those old places up probably 5 or 6 times what their real market value was at the time. But they did preserve a lot of places, and if she hadn't been willing to do this, they would never have been restored, I'm afraid. Operation Clapboard did do some, but not to the extent that she was able to do, because they were able to acquire them and restore them and then rent them out. They still do that, of course. They never sell them, they just own them and rent them. And when I was involved in it, in the early part of it, trying to help with the bookkeeping, so to speak, and Louise Benson, who worked at the bank, who had retired, she was working there with John Brown. The people from New York came up, and they were talking about what should they charge for rent on a restored house. And I said, you can charge what you want, but you'll never get out the money that you put into it, because it costs you so much just to acquire the place, and then you paid that plus more to restore it, and how are you going to be able to get your money out when you have to maintain it, and all. So they said, well, we'll just have to charge what we can get and see if we can operate with that figure, because being a non-profit organization, they could do this. Now, I don't know whether she had hired a former Internal Revenue agent, and he was one of the people that was involved in her foundation in New York. So if there are any tax angles, he was the one who knew it. But I'm grateful to Doris Duke for what she did for the city of Newport in that respect.
She not only has saved the historic houses, but she has made neighborhoods upgrade themselves.
Yes,
that is certainly a wonderful thing. Now, whenever there is any kind of redevelopment, of course, there's always displacement.
Mhm.
Now, in your neighborhood, nothing like that has taken place, but I suppose you were aware at the time that you were interested in the foundation that people were pushed out
Mhm.
of their homes, some of them.
Yes.
What do you think of Broadway and West Broadway as it looks today? I'm always amazed every time I go down there to see something else that they've finished doing.
It looks strange because of what we've seen for so long, but I think it is an improvement. I think there's a lot of, real bad situations there that we cleaned up, fire problems, I think. And there are more on Broadway in that area I'd still like to see turned around, but that's maybe another phase later on, we don't know. Redevelopment in one way has been good for Newport because it changed, it took out a lot of things that were no longer necessary, like old coal yards and oil tanks and this type of thing, and really did clean up the waterfront. But when I think about the access people had to the waterfront and what's happening today, where the waterfront has changed to the point where you can't get to it anymore. The city fathers, that is going back years, always said that we would have a waterfront road that would go along the waterfront to Wellington Avenue so that everybody could see it. But I guess what they've done with America's Cup Avenue and Memorial Boulevard, they've sort of divided the city. As my son said, that engineers are great for this. They'll run a highway through a city and split it in half. They don't care about the effect,
No.
just to move the cars. But they lost a lot of land because of the redevelopment down there with three roads, Thames Street and America's Cup Avenue. They've got three instead of two. With Queen Anne Square, it looks lovely, but at the same time, they lost a lot of valuable real estate that could have been used for shops. The name of the game today, as I see it, is greed. With the new people coming in that want to build timeshare and condominiums, they don't really care about Newport. They'll say a lot, but they don't really care what the place looks like or what it does, cut off the access to the water, anything else. They want to get it up in their way and get the money out. The problems they had with the inn on the waterfront there and with Buddy Hill's building, I think it's a nice thing he did. He restored that building, but at the same time,
The old mill.
the old mill, some things he's doing that he pushes a little too hard, too much.
Well, no one has solved the ghastly traffic situation
No.
down there, which is getting so bad that we won't go down in the summertime.
That can be solved very easily, but nobody seems to think about it or care to think about it, and that's to build parking garages. There really should be three in Newport. There should be one where the Mary Street lot is that will take, you can build one deck at a time. It doesn't have to be all built at once. And then there should be one maybe down the old railroad yard. They're talking about Rose Island. It would be an ideal place for a parking garage for people who want to go to Rose Island. You can park in the garage and taxi out to the island by boat. Then there should be one on Bellevue Avenue, and I think it should be behind the Newport Savings and Loan. They own part of that land now, and I guess J.T. O'Connell interests own the big old transportation garage back there, as I understand it, which is a big fire hazard. But if that was cleaned out and they had a parking garage, that would take a lot of cars off Bellevue Avenue. There shouldn't be any cars parked down there, because if you go up there in the summer and you've got cars parked on both sides of Bellevue Avenue and you've got 2 lanes of traffic and then you hear a siren, there's nowhere you can go and no way that fire truck or emergency truck or anything is going to get through. So they shouldn't block the street with parked cars. They've got a problem downtown now with the homeowners who want to have a space in front of their house because they can't get a car in their yard or they don't have a garage. So if they had the parking garage and they would force all the tourists to park in there, plus any citizens who want to go downtown, if they had the sticker the same as they have now, this would alleviate a lot of traffic problems.
Do you think that it's feasible to build one that would pay for itself or even get the traffic off the street that wouldn't be awfully hideous?
I've seen one in New Bedford. I've seen one, I think, in Salem and other places, a parking garage.
There's some horrible looking ones.
But they don't look like garages. The makeup is like trellis out of cement. It's open, but it's ornate, so that it isn't a big stark wall or just a chain link covering or anything like that. It's attractive, really, and it can be that way. It doesn't have to be a horrible looking monstrosity. But if they don't get the cars off the street, it's going to be an awful mess.
There'll be one awful emergency
Mhm.
where there'll be
This is what
some,
I'm
it's
afraid of.
very tragic.
I know one time at the bank had somebody trying to pass bad checks, and they called the police, tried to detain the person. And it was, had to try to detain the person, but this was in the summer when it was Jazz Festival, something was in it. It took so long for the police to get there, and then I get in the car with the police, and we were trying to trace the route of the person, and we couldn't get through the streets. So it ended up that the policeman had to drive through a one-way street the wrong way in order to get to another street, and this was the problem. And this was just a small matter, but in a real emergency, it would have been awful.
Terrible, just terrible. But I guess there are a lot of cities in that same bind now that New York City hasn't gotten their fire lanes as well done as they can. You'll see it down Fifth Avenue fire lane. Cars are there anyway.
Sure. That's right.
We've talked about the restoration a bit and redevelopment. We didn't give Mrs. Warren and her group any great discussion for what she did to really, before Mr. Brown came to town.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to give Mrs. Warren and the Newport Preservation Society equal credit, because these big houses would have gone the way of Bonnycrest and a few of the others. They would be dormitories or condominiums and just ruined. They started out small with Hunter House, of course, and as the other places became available, she had the forethought to organize and obtain these places for preservation. And I think it's a fantastic thing. I think these buildings have brought more people to Newport than anything else I can think of. People all over have come to Newport just to see these mansions.
And then, in continuation, because of what the Newport Restoration Foundation has done, they find Newport is a charming place and come back again after they've seen the mansions to see the rest
the
Of the-
rest of
of the
Newport,
town.
right. And I know of people who have come to Newport strictly because of this restoration work and the fact that it's so steeped in history. And with all the colonial places available, there was a lineup waiting for available colonial houses to buy, and you couldn't find them anymore because so many people, there was such a demand for people that wanted to get out of New York or some other large city and move to a place like Newport. There was a big demand for them. I still think there is today too.
One of the things I think that's a little too bad about the Doris Duke houses is that they have been priced out of the range of the first tenants who came, the professional retired people. They've had to move out, which is too bad.
I know it. I think the foundation got a little hard-nosed about things that I know a while back there was a big to-do about the storm windows and this type of thing. And I think they could have worked that out and other things and not been so strong about it, because you can get somebody in that will pay a higher rent. You can also get a tenant that says, well, I'm paying for this and I don't care what happens. What do I care? I don't own it, but I'm certainly paying for it. And what you need is a tenant who treats it like his own home, and these professional people do.
And I think the ones that have stuck it out definitely do, and I think probably there's come
It's
a good
got a bit
level
balanced now, yeah.
now.
Yeah.
You are not aware of any people being displaced throughout our redevelopment or restoration,
Well,
are you?
there have been, but they were able to do something else. Just people through the bank, for one thing, who would come in and say that the redevelopment has taken my house, I have to get out, I have to have another place. And I was able to help them financially relocate and buy a home. I know that for one case, a woman had a house and she bought a house on Broadway, and I think since then she's sold it. And I don't know if she's retired, moved somewhere else, but
These weren't real hardship cases.
No, not a case where they had nothing. Now, those people, I don't know whether they were relocated into housing in town near Parkholm or Chapel Terrace or something like that, to low-income housing. But I know of another family at the Restoration Foundation. They bought the house, but they bought it only because the owner wanted to build a new house in Portsmouth. It was a family thing, and they were building this new place, and they wanted to sell the one on Division Street, and I said, well, why don't you, I knew what it was a colonial. It needed a lot of work, but I said, why don't you talk to the Newport Restoration Foundation? They did, and they sold it to them at a good price. They got a good price for it, so they were able to do their new home. Another man that owned one on Division Street, he wanted to move because the place was bigger than what he needed now, and so he put it on the market. I don't know whether he offered it to the restoration, but somebody from out of town who was dying to get their hands on a colonial bought it, and they completely restored it. But they sold it at the right time. They had a ready buyer, and they were lucky. Otherwise, I don't think they'd gotten but a few $1,000s for the houses.
Did the departure of the fleet make any difference to you or your family?
Personally, no. but to the bank it did in one respect, and that was our consumer loan department. We did an awful lot of business with the Navy through this consumer loan department, with personal loans, automobile loans, this sort of thing. And the ones that felt it the most were those businesses that were Navy-oriented, but some of those were national or chain organizations, so they could just close up and move to Norfolk or Florida or wherever the ships were going. Or they just went. But Newport did feel it for a while, but with tourism, it filled the gap. It sort of took over, so that it eased the pain.
But the city fathers were just tearing their hair out about it, and yet when there was a chance of the thought that they might come back, they weren't very
too receptive.
hospitable,
Right.
and then they tore their hair out again when they found it was a false alarm.
Yeah.
You just can't please everybody all the time.
Well, of course, the Navy has changed from what it was 50 years ago. It's not the same group. That is, the young men going in are not the same as they were 50 years ago. These young fellows now are high school graduates or college graduates that go in, and they're more of a clean-cut type. I think their biggest problem today may be with, like it is anywhere, with drugs. But in the old days, it was a hard-drinking, hard-fighting bunch, and there was more trouble. And this is what people were afraid of, that they would come back and there would be more trouble. But as I said, the Navy doesn't want that image, and so they got rid of it, and I think it was well that they did.
And there's not the, evidently not quite the need for that Thames Street Saloon
No.
atmosphere. That's been taken over by the young tourist
Yeah.
group in town.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, people that come from out of town because of the drinking age. And until Rhode Island makes it 21, they're going to have this problem.
They're
These
going to
kids
have
are-
it even after 21.
Yeah, well, they'll sneak it if they can get it.
Did you use the Fall River boat ever?
No, I didn't, but my wife did. Her father did when he went to New York on buying trips. But as a young high school age person, we used to go down to see it come in and see it depart. And even other times we go down and see the train come in at night from Fall River. And we would go over to the rail yard and actually help the engineer turn the train around. They had a round table down there, a turntable. So it was amazing to think that we could take and push this huge locomotive all by yourself on the turntable. It was quite a feeling, like Charles Atlas.
Did you know, or did any of the parents of your friends work down there in either the shops or on the boats?
Well, after being out in the working world, you meet people and say, well, my father worked on the Fall River line. We used to live in Fall River, and then he came down to Newport to work. So that was the only connection I had with anybody. Found out afterwards that their father worked on the Fall River line in one capacity or another. But they were beautiful boats, the old Fall River line. They looked so pretty coming down the bay at night, all lit up. All I could think of was a big wedding cake, white with candles.
But you did get inside and
Oh,
see
yeah.
that it was a wedding cake inside
Right,
also.
it was beautiful inside. Yes, when anybody I knew that was going to New York would go on board with them until they set all ashore, you know. And they were beautiful boats, really were. The Mary Street YMCA bought a lot of their furniture when they were getting rid of it. All the carpeting, furniture for the lobby.
this sort of thing, they bought a lot of that. So that stayed around for quite a while.
Did it have the smell of the boat on it
No.
after it got in? Because there was that lovely smell of wet hemp that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
over
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
We know that a lot of people were out of work when the mine closed.
That's
Very
right.
hard for
Yeah.
a lot of people. I'm trying now to go back to how old you were in 1932 when Let's get back to where we were talking about some home brew.
1932 period, before.
Or before that. This was wine and beer.
Yes.
You collected bottles
Yeah,
on the drive.
right. Well, Mr. Capasilli, who lived next door, the Italian, had made his own wine, and he would buy grapes, and then he had a press in his cellar, and he would bring the press out into the yard and press the grapes, and then because he would let them ferment, he would have his own red wine. But anybody, and most of the people, I guess, in the neighborhood made their own home beer, and there were 2 or 3 shops. Now this was strange because it was in Prohibition, and there were 2 or 3 shops in Newport that sold everything you needed. They sold crocks, and they sold bottle caps, and they sold cappers with machines for crimping the caps on the bottles. They sold the hose you needed to siphon the brew from the crock to the bottles, and they sold the hops and the malt. And, I guess they sold raisins too. Some people put the raisins in there, and then because you bought the yeast in the regular market. But all of these things were available, and
It was not against the law to make it.
to make it at home, as long as you didn't sell it, I guess. But the old homebrew did have a kick in it, and as I said, most people, a lot of people made their own, and because my father made it, and Bill Coughlin, the man that I worked for at the dairy, he was making his own and collecting bottles. And bottles were hard to come by because unless somebody threw one away, you had to buy them and give them a good washing and before you used them. Wine wasn't quite as prevalent, I don't think, as the beer. But over on what was called Bath Road, and there's a few other places, they had speakeasies where you had to be known to get in it, but you could go in there and you could buy your liquor. And this was the bathtub gin, I guess, and the moonshine, the real hard liquor. But they weren't too prevalent. But I remember when the old police station was down on Bank Street at Market Square. Across the street from the police station was Drury's Market, and Drury's Market supplied all the liquor for the parties down the avenue. And none of the policemen saw anything going in or out. It was so strange. And during that same period, of course, we had the rum runners. And when we lived on Bellevue Avenue, there was a family that moved across the street from us. It was a nice family. Never thought anything about them being anything else. Father was a fisherman, and he had a couple of brothers. They'd come to Newport from Maine. And I remember one time saying they were going to have some boat races out in the harbor. Some of the fishing boats were going to race. Well, he said his boat would run away with many of them. Well, suddenly, I don't know, somehow we found out that he was a rum runner. He never got caught at it, but he had a boat with a big, powerful engine in it that the Coast Guard couldn't catch, and I guess they would run out fishing, and some boat would dump the liquor over for them, or they'd offload it, and they'd race for a port someplace to unload it, and figured Newport was a good place to make some money. But that was my experience with rum runners. I remember one time there was a big rush down to Belmont Beach. The boat was caught by the Coast Guard. I think it was the Black Duck, and they threw all of the liquor overboard, and everybody was down at Belmont's Beach picking it off the beach. So they got home with their own liquor.
And that might have been the good stuff.
Yeah, that was. They wouldn't go down for anything that wasn't, believe me. But they went down there. They knew it was good stuff right off the boat.
And then by the time you were an adult, by the time of repeal, and you didn't go through that post-adolescent time that some of us went through when we didn't know how to handle
Right.
what was available.
Well, I know that when I was during Prohibition and we had beer in the house, I didn't like it. I tasted it. And the only way I would drink it would be if I put sugar in it. So I have maybe a little bit of beer and it would foam when you put the sugar in it. But that was the height of my
Drinking.
yeah.
I wonder if you had any feeling about whether, by the time Prohibition had, time you were aware of Prohibition, you hadn't known anything else. There's a question here: do you feel that most people in Newport wanted Prohibition or didn't want it? I imagine that most people got what they wanted to drink, whether it was.
I think that, yes, the ones that wanted the hard liquor and the ones that wanted to get drunk got to the speakeasy and were able to get their bottle. The ones that just wanted an occasional drink, like most of the working men, when they finished for the day and they came home, they'd like to have a bottle of beer before supper or something like that. And I guess that they always stopped into the saloon after work and then went home and had their dinner. And my father said that a good bartender would never serve drinks to anybody who was drunk or who was getting drunk. They'd tell them to get out, they just wouldn't serve it. And they pretty well, after Prohibition was over, and then the bars began to open in package stores, you didn't have a lot of people staggering all over town, because I think that most of the people knew how to handle their liquor. They had it at home, maybe, and if they wanted to drink, they had it. They just didn't go out and get soused. They handled it pretty well.
And the sailors had always been soused down on Thames Street.
Well, I think because a good part of the sailors, haven't been in the sailors myself, a good part of that happens because of loneliness.
Nothing else to do.
Yeah, they're away from home, and they get down, so they have a drink, and then they have another drink, and pretty soon it's too
And
late.
their peers are all doing the same thing,
Yes.
too. Where were you when the 1938 hurricane hit Newport?
I was working at the time, and the bookkeeping department of the bank was on the second floor, and it looked right out on Thames Street. So we happened to say, gee, look at the sign blowing. It must be pretty windy out today, you know. The signs were almost going in circles. And when we finished for the day, I said to the girls, well, it's pretty windy and wet. I'll give you a ride home. I had my first car. Okay, so we started out, and I said, but there's a good surf down by the beach. Go down and take a look. Well, I said, well, first I better stop and get some gasoline. And in fact, I think we were going to go around the drive. I went to the gas pump, but the electricity was off, going off, so I couldn't get gasoline. So I said, well, better get you home. So we started. Well, about every street we tried to go through, there was a tree down. And we worked our way till I got them all dropped off along the way. And I came back through Eustis Avenue, and I couldn't even see the beach. It was so windy and wet that you just couldn't see. It was thick. I got home, put the car in the garage, and my sister was at that time was working in the restaurant as cashier down on Page Street, and it was in a building that's no longer there. It was right next to the brick market.
On the water side.
Yeah. And we were concerned about her, because it was in that area. So I said, well, I'll go down and find out. So I went down, and the water was up to the foot of the park. It was all flooded, but I found out they were safe. They were in the building, but the water hadn't risen that far there, so they were able to go to a second floor and be safe. And so as the water receded, they came out, and somebody had a rowboat down there that was helping people out. So she finally did get home. And my wife said that she was in the show. I'm sure it was in one of the square where it was the Paramount. And she said that the film kept stopping and starting, and they didn't think much of it, something wrong, that's all. So the thing finally got over, and we started out for home, and the trees were coming down, and windows were blowing out. Oh, they were scared to death then, but they managed to get home okay. But the force of that water was tremendous what it did.
Well, now, when you were about to take the bank girls down to First Beach, was that the time that didn't a priest either lose his
He lost
life
his life
down
yes.
there? Would it have been about that same hour?
Yes, I think so, because what happened was that the tide was so high, the road was flooded, and any cars that tried to get across stalled. And some people took refuge in the beach itself,
Rotunda, was it, or
Convention Hall. In there, most of them, I think, get in there because there were people working at the beach at that time. And they got in there and thought they were safe. And those that didn't get over there because the water was so high, some people climbed the poles, the telephone poles were there. And I think that's what happened to him. He climbed the pole and this huge tidal wave came over, and it wiped the beach out and took him and everybody else and threw them in the pond, because most of the beach ended up in Easton's Pond. There was a man that lived near me for a while. I don't know whether he's still there, but he was down there at the time, and he was trapped in there. And I know a couple of others. A friend of mine's father was in there, and his car had stalled coming across. He got caught in there. He was in the convention hall. Water just lifted the floor up. They went up with it and just picked them up and dumped them all over there. But it did wipe out the beach completely. There's only one building left down there now, and that's still there. It's sits back between the road and the pond. It's where the electric transformer is. It's that same stucco that they had on the beach, but it's the only piece that was left. Everything else was wiped out.
You had said earlier about going down to the beach, and I think it would be rather nice to describe the beach as you remembered it before the hurricane and the use that you boys and girls made of the beach. Get that on the record.
Well, it was a great spot because when you came down the hill to the beach, the first area was the private bathhouse section. And this section had a long piazza on it that ran from the beginning of it up to the entrance, the main entrance to the beach. And this is where the people who use the private bathhouses could sit in the shade. And every day, the orchestra that they had at the beach played, sat on the piazza right at the entrance to the bathhouses, and they played during the day. Next to the entrance was the merry-go-round, and then the various concessions. They had wheels, of course. They had a Japanese pole string. You pull the string, you got some kind of a prize. They had the Japanese had they made rice cakes out of a batter, and they made their own potato chips. They were the best potato chips in the world. They had games of skill. They had also had a penny arcade that had all the things that you could find in a penny arcade, like the test your strength type things, and you put a penny in and turn the crank, and the series of postcards. It was like watching a movie. It was full of entertainment type things. They had a dance hall that operated at night, but not every night. They had the convention hall, which consisted of two big halls. One was side had a cafeteria and a soda fountain, and was connected to the dance hall. The other side, in the center, was a huge kitchen, and then on the far east side of it, there was another hall that they used as a dining room for shore dinners during the day, and at night it became a nightclub type operation. They had a little dance floor and a little stage, and they had the orchestra that played at night and was dancing. And I think they also had a little floor show that went along with it. And then they had a shooting gallery, and they had dodgers and a whoopee wheel, and the roller coaster was the last in line. But along the whole thing from the main entrance to the creek, as they call it, that runs from the pond, was a big boardwalk. And next to the roller coaster, but behind it, was a big swimming pool they called the Roman pool. I don't know why. It was a big swimming pool with a high dive in it, and a little grandstand inside.
That was salt water. Pulled up?
No, I think it was fresh
fresh
water. I think it was fresh, yeah. But we found a way to get in there without paying, so we found if we went under the boardwalk and we came up under the bleachers by the pool, we could put our towel and everything up on the seat, and then when nobody was looking, we'd get up and jump in the pool. As long as we were all wet and we had our towel and everything,
You looked like
they
you
didn't
belonged.
know whether we belonged or not. But it was a great place to go during the day, and at that time you could play ball on the beach, so we made paddles out of plywood that we used to play tennis on the beach. We'd mark off in the hard sand at low tide, we had a good firm surface. We'd mark off a court, and then we'd play tennis paddles, and had a lot of fun that way. I worked at the beach one summer in the kitchen, in the cafeteria. And then at night, when the head dancers worked in there, they had a little bar in the cafeteria just for the dancing at night. And I worked in there, selling pitchers of beer, that type of thing. So that was the summer before I think I worked in May. It was a lot of fun. Went to work at 8 o'clock, worked until about 4, had a break, when we were going to work at night, and then we could go off and come back. Usually during the day, when you've got a break for lunch, we go ride the merry-go-round or go into the pool because we could go in free then because we worked there. But it was a lot of fun.
And never any discussion at all of trying to rebuild any of that?
No, the only, well, let's say the furthest they got with it was to build what's there now. Some bathhouses and a merry-go-round, and that's it. And that's been a big disappointment. If it's an entertainment place, it would be fine. It wouldn't have to be hunky-tonk, but it could be a lot of fun. Wouldn't have to have a lot of noise with it, but it could be a lot of fun. There was a little amusement area on the other side of the Newport Beach. It was called Atlantic Beach, on the other side of the creek. And they had an amusement area, a boardwalk, and they had a merry-go-round and other things, but it wasn't very well attended.
Now that's a place they're talking about having another hotel, which
right.
would be ridiculous to try to think that that would not be flooded again.
Yes, that's true.
You told me your war experiences all out of town, and since we are only supposed to be doing your neighborhood, tell me what happened in your neighborhood to your family and your family's friends during the time that you were away. Do you think that they were affected any more than other people left home?
No, I
The
don't.
shortages were just about the same and no worse.
I think they were about the same. Because everything was rationed, we didn't.
Your father probably had steady work during
Yes,
that time.
he did, but steady work that he had too much work. He was working for the government, maybe it was a contractor, down at Fleet Landing when they were changing that over from the New York boat landing to the Fleet Landing. And they were always after him to work overtime. And he said, I don't want to work overtime. He said, I don't need to kill myself for this kind of thing. He said, because you would get overtime pay, but the taxes would take so much of it that he'd be working for practically nothing, working overtime. So he said, no, I'll work my 8 hours and you get 8 hours work out of me. But he said, I don't want to make any overtime because you really didn't make anything. It wasn't worth the effort. But people found ways to make do if you were rationed. We found all these weird recipes, I guess, that came out of World War II that you could make up something out of another item and call it what you wanted, and it would taste just as good. I found that out.
Well, sometimes if you had a bigger family than just 1 or 2 people, you did pretty well because you could, there were certain things that you didn't use in that family that maybe the other people had some ration tickets for.
That's right.
We were able to do that down in the Georgia area where my husband was on.
So my brother had a car and I had a car,
and we were rationed on gasoline. This is before we went into service, and we would divide it up. If he needed to use his car and he needed gas, we could.
Just as we did in the shortage.
Sure. You'd swap around and get around it somehow. You made out. I know that when we were in Italy, we had a baker, and we took over this building in Pisa that was almost like a hostel, I guess, where people traveling could stop. But it had a brick ovens in it, and this baker then made bread for all the units. But it wasn't the regular GI bread. It was Vienna bread, and he also made ice cream out of evaporated milk. And so we would go to him and get a nice fresh loaf of hot out of the oven Vienna bread. But we used to say we'd get a ration of so many Coke and so many beer, and so we would swap our Coke for beer with somebody who didn't want beer, and we would save it, write home and say, send me a can of tuna fish or a can of lobster or crab meat, something like this that you could get. And so somebody would send a package. We'd get this and some jerky's sauce. So when we got all this together, we'd open the cans and we'd make up a sandwich. And we'd have a lobster sandwich with beer. So, rationing didn't bother us too much. You could get that type of thing.
Well, the GIs always had good food all the way through.
Well,
didn't they?
Maybe they thought it was good, but it wasn't. It was horrible. They had preserved butter, which was like lard, and it got stuck in the roof of your mouth and you couldn't get rid of it. Everything was dehydrated, and before that, we were on sea rations. And if you can stomach the same food every day, one fellow, you didn't even have to see it. You just had to say it, and he broke out in a rash. It had a reaction.
I remember the scrambled eggs in a little thing like this.
Yeah, we had some great experiences talking about making up concoctions.
I wish we could go on about that, but that hasn't got much to do with the neighborhood, does it?
No.
I don't suppose that the torpedo station meant much to your neighborhood either, except that if there was someone who could work at the torpedo station, they obviously had to go, didn't they?
Yeah, we had several people who lived in the neighborhood who worked at the torpedo station as machinists, and you still find them today around the people that came from out of town to work at the torpedo station in Newport. A lot of them came, I guess, that time after World War I. And then when World War II came along, it was even bigger. So more people came in at that time.
And stayed.
Yeah.
And then, but that was about the beginning, however, in World War II, the beginning of the real working force of the women, wasn't it?
Yeah. They found that women could do a lot of things that the men could do, and that's when they really got into the market, you might say.
Did any of the members of your family take an active part in volunteer work, Red Cross or USO or anything?
I think my sister may have, but that's hard to say because being away for most of that time. But I know she did things down at the Navy Y and was great.
Do you remember there saying anything about celebrating on VJ Day? You were not back on VJ Day, or were you back on VJ Day? No, you weren't back.
No, I wasn't back. I had to stay till the bitter end. No, I wasn't back. I got back in October. VJ was in August, and I think I would finally get back in October.
Which jazz festival were you in town for? The bad one?
Yeah, I remember that. I'll never forget it because,
You could hear, of course, everything. The bad one was at Freebody.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, what had happened, it started out very nicely at the casino, and it was a very quiet operation. And it got bigger and moved to Freebody Park, and it started to attract a lot of undesirable people, I think. But for that particular one, we were in New Hampshire, and it wasn't until we were coming home from New Hampshire and we couldn't get home. We got as far as the Tiverton Bridge, and they wouldn't let us cross the bridge. So I went back around and came to the Mount Hope, get them across the Mount Hope. And I forget finally how we got in. They finally let us in. We had to prove to them that we were citizens of the city of Newport and we were coming home. And this was true of a lot of people who were coming to visit people in Newport. They couldn't get here because of this riot that they had the night before. And we didn't know what the heck was going on. We thought that there'd been some big disaster in Newport. And finally, somebody to explain why can't we go home? And they were keeping everybody out until they pushed everybody off the island and wasn't supposed to be there, which was ridiculous. But then I didn't have any clout, so I couldn't do anything about it. Just had to wait. But it was so inconvenient to a lot of people in that situation.
It was terrifying for the people, too, in the
area.
neighborhood. Yes.
Well, we used to go over, not to go to the festival, but to look at the people who were going to the festival, because they were more fun to watch than to listen to the jazz, because they came from, a lot of them came up from New York, and they had some weird outfits on, and strange looking people too. But this was, as I said before, the undesirable element came in. And I think all they came for was to cause problems, because they were not jazz fans, they just caused problems. Real jazz fans would just sit quietly and listen to the music. They were just looking for trouble, to create trouble, drinking and music.
That festival field that was almost the end until the recent ones. They did have trouble again with the same kinds of people.
Type of people, right. The festivals they didn't have any trouble with was the Kill That Dryness. The festivals that didn't really cause any problem were the folk festivals that they held at Freebody Park, and they wouldn't have any problem. And one that they don't have anymore, the opera festival, they had at Cadiz Field, did they? And did they have some over here at Connell Highway, I forget, but they were never any problem. It's the type of people that these things attract.
Well, it's very interesting now that there are enough people who really want to come and listen to jazz to go out to the Fort
Fort Adams.
Adams and have those restrictions, daytime and no beer.
Yeah.
When we were talking about restoration, we didn't talk about how wonderful the state has done those two parks for us. An unusual
Brent Park is really lovely.
for the state to be successful
right.
in two ways.
Yeah. I don't think they're going far enough with Fort Adams, but they probably
the money.
will go fairly well. There isn't one around, and my son thought that it would be a great place to have an artillery museum.
I think they're hoping to have a museum in the casemates eventually.
Yeah. It would be great to have that. I often thought that they could put a show on there for tourists, hire college students, for high school students in the summer to be soldiers and to put on some kind of a show, a demonstration just for the tourists to see. Run it 2 or 3 times. I often thought too that what we should have, this is just, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this sort of thing, but take people on a bus tour, originating maybe from Newport, take them out to Tiverton and show them where the Fort
Barton, I think.
Barton is, and explain to them about crossing the river, coming over and catching General Prescott at the Prescott farm, how they came up, followed the brook up to the house, and then come in and talk about Washington Square and the old Colony House, and give them the whole thing, let them see it, and put on a little show before them at these different locations.
I think that wouldn't be too difficult. Using a Viking bus and getting the script, and I know a couple of people that are very much interested in Fort Barton, Dr. Holt over in Tiverton. I think you could get, I think that would be something for you to think about arranging. It could be done for the benefit of the artillery company or the benefit of something,
Yeah.
make a little money on it.
Right. They could, like I said, they have a group of people who are coming up the brook and going up to the,
You wouldn't have General Prescott being caught in bed, would you?
yeah, try to, well, or have him jumping out the window or something, drag him into Newport and then put on a show in Newport.
Do you know Captain Arthur Newell? The clock
I know who
man.
he is, but I don't know him.
He's a great theatrical
Is he?
person. Oh, he would write you the script and everything. We'll have to think about that because that sounds great. What was your feeling when you heard that there was going to be a Newport Bridge and no more ferry?
Well, that was a vast, huge relief. I had 2 in URI at the time, and we said, I bet this bridge will never be finished before they're finished school, because to get down there, and they had to get over to school and catch a ferry, and you get in line, and you just about get up there, and that ferry's full, and that goes, and you have to wait for the next one.
And wintertime was always an hour.
That's right. And another thing was that if you were out of town and you came over to Jamestown to get the ferry to Newport, and you were coming up from New York, if you didn't get there in time, then you had to go back and go all the way around to get home. I remember one time in the bank, we had this was just before World War II. One of the fellows was going into the military, and we gave him a party, and we were out at a place called Luke's Lodge, which is no longer there, I guess. It was in Portsmouth, just between the Tiverton Bridge and the Newport Bridge. It was one of the side roads there. And we had this party out at Luke's Lodge. Well, one of the girls came from Jamestown. And she said, oh gosh, I have to go. You have to get the ferry home. It's the last ferry. So we were rushing and we got to the short line garage and I needed some water in the radiator of the car. So I stopped, knew the fellow there, and filled it up, and we headed for the ferry. Down at the ferry landing, and there's the ferry already out there. She says, blow your horn, blink your lights, blow your horn, blink your lights. I was blowing the horn, but she says, the ferry will come back. And sure enough, it stopped, came back, picked her up, and went on its way. And this was the ferry that left Newport right after the last movie got over, 11:15 or in that period. But I'll never forget that. She blow the horn and blink the lights, and they'll come back, and they did.
I think they must have known they needed to come back that night. She probably had somebody that worked there on the ferry that knew that she hadn't made it.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, it made a lot of difference, certainly, to a lot of people to have the bridge come.
Yeah.
And it's made a lot of difference to Newport, too. Are you interested in America's Cup having left or having been here? Have you any reminiscences? Did you go down on the docks? I forget when the hiatus was between the time of the big J boats and the present ones. But as a boy, you must have seen the big ones.
Yes. That J boats went out the last time, I guess, was when I think what it was, Lipton was the last of the J boat.
I know.
Or was it, but the J boats, I don't remember too much. I saw them, yes, but I was so small I can't say that I knew too much about it until we got into the smaller ones. But the races didn't occur that often. It's going to make a great deal of difference to me. I thought this last one, the Americans should have just let things go and then sail the race, and if the Australians won the cup, then they could have argued about it later. But it's going to cost them a lot of money to go over there and race the Australians. Whether they will beat them again, we don't know. There's a couple of them come back, but it would seem to me that they've got it. They can say, well, you own it now, keep it forever and ever, and we'll start a new cup and call it Newport's Cup or whatever, and open it up to every country in the world that wants to bring a yacht over here and race. And we'll just let them all race together. And on a regular elimination race where you get down to where, let's say, the first 4 yachts will be in the next race, or whatever. And then the next 2 that are left, they'll race for the cup. They'll be the finals. You could do this, and you could even do it every 2 years or every year, whichever.
It certainly wouldn't cost as much as these whole summers of these foreign crews having to be housed here. That really gets into an investment of a sort that has really very little to do with racing.
That's right. It's the cost, and that's right off when they're coming. The rent on a place is going to be sky high. You know that.
But there are going to be just so many Bowen Beaks and just so
That's
many
right.
wealthy Australians, and in this country we certainly are going to run out of sponsors.
I think so. But the thing is that there's talk about it, that the next race would be in California. Well, I say that if they want to race for the Cup in Australia, they take the California flag.
But if you don't
But
want
we
to.
can do the same thing here on our own and create just as much competition here. Why we have to worry about California. We still, if we're lucky, have the Bermuda races and then the Annapolis race. But I said it once before, and the word is greed. There are too many greedy people. They want to get every last nickel they can, and I think it's the wrong thing because you have to look at the big picture. How much money is going to be spent here? Not how much am I going to get? These people who own the docks, and why should they have to raise the rates so high? And you know the cost of food in Newport jumps when you go to a restaurant. It jumps $5 a meal almost, which is not right. If they don't want us in there, just say you got it, people own it. But they all have to do it.
You know,
It's not right. And
well,
this,
for some of us Newporters, we just don't have anything to do with the downtown
you
at
just stay
all.
away from it. We did that this last year. We never went down there. Well, the previous race we went down, yes. But this one we stayed completely away from it because it was so crowded. We couldn't. And then there was always the chance that something would happen and people drinking on the streets. You can't prevent it. There are too many people down there allowing them to take it out of the bar or take it out of the restaurant onto the street. Well, they have open bars now down there. Bannister's walking down on Christie's and these other places where you can sit outside and get the liquor and you can walk off with it. Nobody's going to stop. You get it on, you can buy, bought it, it's mine. You can walk off with it. And they're drinking on the street. And if they get ugly, well, the fight stop. So they can have it. Stay away from it.
The people that live below Bellevue Avenue have a terrible time with the bars letting out at night, the traffic. It doesn't come up to your
We don't.
Annandale,
No,
does it?
we don't get
And you
it.
don't have any all-day parkers along, walking down the hill. You're just
Not
outside
just
of that.
outside of it, yes. The only problem we have sometimes is with some of the college students that might park because they're having a party at one of the dorms or something like that. But they've got to watch that too because they get control. If that gets out of hand, you know, either liquor or something else, and there'll be problems. They've got to
As
watch
it is now, they don't seem to be very welcome as they ask for a new dorm around that part of town.
Well, they've eaten up so much of the real estate, and it's taken it all off the tax rolls, all of that property. I don't say that they shouldn't have the dorms, but I think that they should be restricted. That campus should be contained, not allowed to spread too far, because they're going to find out that South Regina owns a big piece of Newport and they're not paying any taxes on it. And they can say what they want about how much money the students need in Newport, but they don't leave that much. They can say that, but they can't prove it. Most of those people come in there in jeans. They're not out buying fancy clothing or anything else. And they all eat in their dining rooms, not out dining in restaurants or anything else. But there's not that much spent.
I wouldn't think so, and it's an expensive place, and I don't think they've got that much extra money. Probably the students don't have that much to throw around.
Many colleges today, it's so expensive to go to. Your father has to give in there to give you an allowance to spend the money like that.
Or you have to be very poor and get your scholarship.
Right? And even then, you know, you just don't have it.
Do you have any idea what your part of town could be called to fit into our we had Bellevue Avenue, we had Old Beach Road, K Street, and we don't have anything for your part of town. Where do you think you would fit in for area, for neighborhood? I think we just have to make a separate neighborhood.
Yeah,
It really is Annandale Road, isn't it?
yeah, between Annandale Road and Bellevue Avenue. And from, you might say
From Bellevue to the beach.
Memorial, yeah, Bellevue to the beach, and from Memorial Avenue south. Because,
It goes as far as Narragansett, maybe.
oh yeah, I'd say so. Narragansett, Bellevue to the water and Memorial Boulevard.
Well, they'll have to decide that. That's not my problem.
Yeah.
Can you think of something? Did you go home and think of other things that you might have added to our first time?
Yeah, about what was in the area or that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that was, another thing that was in the area was the Peter Ferber bottling, who, Peter Ferber had a license for Coca-Cola, and he made his own flavors of sodas. And they were off Bath Road. There's a little court that went in to, I guess you'd call it Chapel Place, that's what it was called, I think. And Peter Ferber's bottling plant was there, and next to that was the high-grade water company that had the spring water. And we used to go cut through there on the way to school, and periodically we'd stop in at Peter Ferber's because they gave you pencils and rulers and calendars, so these were just what you needed for school. And once in a while you'd get a free soda. Because they delivered to all the stores in town, and they did this for the horse, the team horses in the wagon, until they switched over to trucks. Also, in connection with the Aquidneck Dairy, which was on Two's Court, was the Aquidneck Ice Cream Company. It was just a small building where the ice cream was made, but a lot of people don't even know it was there. The building's still there. And they made their ice cream.
Has that got anything to do with the Mayflower, with Andrews Express?
No. Andrews was
He's on First Street.
Off Catherine.
He's on First Street.
Yeah.
I was thinking Two's.
Yeah. And Two's runs off Old Beach, just behind the Lily Street in that area. And, let's see, there's talking about.
Was the Aquidneck, that wasn't the forerunner of any of the other ice cream, the dairy places? Wasn't the beginning of the Rector Creamery?
No, that was a separate. And what happened was that the Depression, when it hit the Aquidneck Dairy, and they just closed up. They closed up the Aquidneck Dairy and the Aquidneck Ice Cream. And there was another few men that had worked for the dairy who started their own dairy. They called it Ogden Farm, was the name they gave it. And they were bottling milk and making home deliveries. But the dairy on Rector's Dairy, Harlow. See which one was it? Was Harlow's, I guess, that brought the name of the equipment. It was Harlow, right? They brought up their customers because somebody had. They were down on both of them were on Elmo Court, I think, Creek Bandstand, Bandstand Avenue. Breakfast was on one side of the street, and Hollow was on the other. Both in competition.
You never had ice cream cones at Laura's?
Oh yeah, I was going to mention Laura's. Laura's was the drugstore in the area, and they kept that up until they built Memorial Boulevard. It never changed. Always the same. And they had the glass top tables, and the little ice cream parlor type chairs with the wire backs, and the glass cases with all the soaps and perfumes and so forth in there. And one thing I remember about Laura's was that when you went in there to buy medicines or whatever, and they wrapped your package, they had a gas flame and they used sealing wax. And all the packages were sealed with the sealing wax. I thought that was really great. But when we were kids, when we went to the movies on Saturday, we always stopped in Laura's on the way home to get an ice cream soda. Laura's was the drugstore where you always went for prescriptions.
And you speak of that. You were speaking about going to the movies, and I was wondering, children were able to go to the movies every Saturday afternoon, whereas now they can't afford, and there are none that are open for them.
Yes, that's true, and there are no movies that are suitable. We used to, because we had 3 theaters in Newport. Originally we had the Bijou, it's on Thames Street. We had the Opera House and the Strand Theater. The first time I went to the movies was at the Bijou, and that was to see Black Beauty. This was silent films. And then I went to see the first talkie. I think that was Al Jolson had it. And my mother was always crazy about Mary Pickford movies, so we'd go to see those. And then after that, it was Janet Gaynor and Charlie Farrell were the matinee idols then, and we always went to see their movies. The other movie in town was the Colonial Theater, and that during the Depression they had were double features, and they used to give the glass tableware, cups, saucers, pitchers, plates, dinner plates, this type of thing. They call it Depression glass. Now they were collector's items. But those were the movies until they built the Paramount. The cost to get in was 10 cents. And you could always go to Eddie's and buy a bag of peanuts for a nickel. Go to the movies and have your peanuts, watch the movie, 10 cents. And they had the cereals too that they made. You'd start out with could be Flash Gordon or Tarzan or one of these things. And they'd give you 10 minutes of it, and then it was continued next week. You wanted to be sure you came back the next week to see the next reel. But the movies were suitable for everybody to go to. And they always had afternoon matinees and then the evening performance. And the price gradually went up, but it stayed 10 to 15 cents for quite a long
they still made money.
So there was still 10 cents left over for Laura's soda.
For a soda, yeah.
The children today are at a great disadvantage.
Yeah. We found that even with our own children, that as they got older and they got onto television, there was no more using your imagination. It was harder for children than it is today to play. The girls always played house and played dolls, and they were copying their mothers, whatever. And the boys would get in on it too. They would be Mr. So-and-so, and they'd play. And I know we used to play because of the age and the time after World War I. We used to play war a lot, and then until we went to the movies, and then it was cowboys and Indians, this type of thing. But we always played. It was always our imagination that took over, and it was as I got older, and the little children who were kids younger than myself, I was always amazed that to listen to them. They had a whole script that they followed, and they talked just like adults. It was really fantastic what these little kids could do. Of course, I was a little kid myself, and not too long before that, but I always think, well, gee, did I do that? It was really something that the children could use their imagination.
No, they don't play that way.
They don't. They really don't. And it's sad in a way that they don't play games either.
They're probably much less imaginative. They know too much that they have learned from television,
Yeah.
and there's no need to
That's right.
to use their own minds.
Yeah. I know that when we played games, there were other games that we talked about before, and one of the things in the neighborhood was that because of the number of people that worked for the people who lived on the avenue, there were chauffeurs and butlers, and they had families, and when the avenue people came to Newport for the summer, they brought their chauffeurs and butlers naturally. And they in turn wanted to have their families come, so they would bring their families, and I know that we had some that stayed with us in the summer. The chauffeur might have to live at the estate, but his wife and daughter or whatever would stay with us. And there were a lot of boys that came whose parents worked for these people in the summer, and they brought games from New York that we used to be able to play on the sidewalk, because everybody played jump rope or hopscotch or some of these other games that they don't play them Universal, but you don't see them playing anymore.
No, they take their skateboards and go by themselves.
Yep, that's it. And it's just not the same.
No.
But it's too bad. I tell my children about it. I showed them a few games that we used to play, and
They didn't have anybody to play with.
No.
They didn't want to play amongst themselves. No.
we used to play horseshoes, and these were real horseshoes right off the horse. The ones that were worn out, when Smithy took them off, he'd throw them away because we'd take them and we could play horseshoes. And there were somebody had a set of quoits. This is the round.
They were rope, weren't they?
No, these were metal with a hole, like a donut. To briefly describe it. And there was one man who worked for Newport Electric Corporation. His name was Kenny, Mr. Kenny, and he had 3 boys and a girl. And he was the champ. I swear there was nobody who could beat Mr. Kenny playing quoits, because every time he threw one, it landed right on the peg as a ringer. Never missed. Never. And then Mr. Sullivan, who was the foreman of the gas company, he came up with a game where we tied a light cord on the telephone pole and a big ring, and then you had to swing it and make it go over the step on the telephone pole, a hook, So you were trying to hook the ring, and this was another challenge. These different games that you had that you played.
You made the equipment
Made it up, yeah.
and made this game and the equipment.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But as I said, it was all games that you played that kept you out of trouble. You didn't get into trouble, but you didn't have all these games to play.
But you obeyed your parents too.
That's another thing. I
Whatever they
remember one
told you,
time-
and they told you. It wasn't a case of letting you run
Yeah.
wild.
There was one time that I remember that there was a big scare because somebody said, let's go around to the tea house. This was when it sat out on the point in the tunnel. So, all right, we all left the neighborhood. This was a gang of boys, must have been 12 or 15 of us. And suddenly it was getting late, and the parents was great. So where's so-and-so? Everybody come out of their houses and where? I go, come on. Nobody knew where we had gone. And we had all gone to the tea house. When we got back, all you could hear was slap, slap, slap. But we caught it because we went off without telling anybody where we went to. Nothing happened, but it was just the idea. Here we were, way off at the tea house, which was a few miles away, you know.
And you didn't go with any idea of vandalizing it.
No,
And
we just
it's